Detectives find out the scary reason a young girl's vanishing. Today, we dive into a chilling case. Most of us spend our weekends relaxing with family, enjoying movies, reading books, or hanging out with friends at various events. However, the main figure in our story had other plans. A young man, instead of a typical weekend, stocked up on pizza, groceries, and sweets, choosing to engage in a dark and unusual activity, disposing of evidence from a crime without any sign of guilt. His dreadful actions, which he executed and seemingly relished over the weekend, culminated early on Sunday, February 6, 2022, in Aalborg, Denmark. The events mirror those of a horror film, but tragically, this was all too real. There were no staged scenes or special effects, and the pain endured by the victim was genuine. In this episode, we discuss the hidden dangers and the criminals living quietly among us. Our victim, 22-year-old Mia Skadaga-Steven, was a kind and outgoing young woman who had always been driven by a desire to help others, leading her to pursue a career in medicine. She began her medical studies in 2016 at Aalborg University, the largest university in Denmark. Her classmates remember her as a curious and enthusiastic student. The path to becoming a medical professional is notoriously challenging, involving extensive study and demanding schedules. Despite these challenges, Mia managed to maintain a healthy lifestyle and even explored modeling, participating in several photos. Her promising journey was nearing its conclusion just after the lockdown in 2022. Final exams and graduation were fast approaching, which might explain why Mia wanted to make the most of her last few days. With the lifting of COVID-19 restrictions, there was an added reason to celebrate. Everyone was eager to reconnect socially. Bars and clubs started bustling once more, and the streets filled with people ready to put the days of isolation behind them. Mia, too, was drawn to the vibrant celebrations marking the end of the semester. That night, however, she made a couple of missteps in her choices of clothing and drinks. Planning to return home by car with friends, she dressed stylishly but too lightly for the weather, and she didn't hold back on alcohol either. As they moved from one party to the next, it wasn't clear how much the drinking was affecting her. Lack of experience with alcohol and fatigue eventually caught up with her. Friends noticed she was more uninhibited than usual, dancing and enjoying herself, seemingly unwilling to end the night. By the time the club was closing at 6 a.m., most of her friends had left, and she found herself without a ride home, having spent all her money. She couldn't even afford a taxi. Deciding to wait for a bus, Mia struck up a conversation with a 22-year-old man she had met at the park. After a brief chat at the bus stop, the young man departed, leaving Mia alone in the early morning hours as their paths diverged. Hours turned into days after Mia and the young man parted ways, but she never made it home. Her family grew increasingly anxious when she didn't return the following day or even the day after that. Within a week, the North Jutland police made a grim announcement. Mia Stevens' remains had been discovered in the forest near Dronninglund, a small town with around 3,500 residents. The shocking detail that her body was dismembered into 231 pieces left the community. We'll delve into the reasons behind her tragic end in our next segment. Denmark is known for its low crime rates and high levels of citizen happiness, making such brutal incidents particularly shocking and rare. This rarity explains why the Steven family hesitated to contact the authorities immediately after Mia's disappearance. It was her first night out following the end of isolation restrictions, and they thought she might have stayed out late celebrating. However, concern was in the air. While her parents were worried, they held on to hope that Mia would soon walk through the door. After she failed to return, they reached out to her boyfriend, who reported he hadn't been able to contact her since the night at the club as her phone was off. As more time passed without any word from her, the family contacted all of Mia's friends and acquaintances. No one had seen her since that night at the club. This uncharacteristic disappearance alarmed her parents. Mia was always responsible about letting them know if she would be late. Eventually, overwhelmed with worry, they reported her missing to the police, who responded promptly and began an immediate investigation. As the search for Mia continued, her family took to the streets and social media to spread the word. Her father scoured the local area by car, while her mother and sister appealed to their online followers for any information, sharing her photo widely. The community responded with overwhelming support, rallying to their aid. Meanwhile, detectives worked diligently, piecing together Mia's last known movements. They reached out to residents near the location where she was last seen and requested CCTV footage as well as any photos or videos from the party that night. The response was significant, with around 400 calls from concerned citizens and over 1,000 files of potential evidence submitted, illustrating the complexity and scale of the task faced by the police. Early evidence did not yield much. Initial reviews of the footage confirmed Mia had left the club around 6 a.m., walking towards the bus stop where she met an acquaintance. After a brief interaction, he departed, leaving her alone to wait for her bus. Police tracked down this individual, who shared details of his meeting with Mia and his actions after leaving her. His alibi checked out, and after verifying his story, he was cleared of any suspicion. As the investigation continued, officers interviewed anyone who had interacted with Mia that night, though these discussions did not significantly advance the investigation. The focus then shifted to understanding Mia more deeply: her dreams, her lifestyle, and her character. She was known as a dedicated student aspiring to a healthcare career, well regarded by all as a good person. There was no evidence of alcohol abuse, drug use, or mental health issues in her background, making her disappearance all the more puzzling and concerning. That evening, Mia's behavior was noticeably different. She consumed far more alcohol than usual and acted with an uncharacteristic abandon. Could this change in behavior have led to unforeseen consequences? It seemed the only plausible explanation for her disappearance, as everyone close to Mia confirmed she had no known enemies or detractors. A theory emerged that perhaps a random individual from the party misread her actions, viewing her as an easy target. As days passed without a trace of Mia, the investigators grew increasingly pessimistic about the likelihood of finding her alive. With no one coming forward with information or a ransom demand, the grim reality set in that she might not be found alive. However, her family clung to hope, while detectives intensified their efforts. On February 9th, 2022, the investigation saw its first potential break. Two young men, childhood friends previously known to law enforcement, emerged as suspects. One was quickly released due to solid alibi evidence, but the other, 36-year-old Thomas Thompson, remained in custody. Though he denied any involvement, his connection to a vehicle seen near Mia on the morning of her disappearance made him a person of interest. A significant development occurred on February 8th when, based on eyewitness accounts, investigators were able to piece together Mia's likely path from the bar to the bus stop. Additional surveillance footage revealed that at 6:09 a.m., a black van pulled up close to where she was last seen. Mia stood at the bus stop, shivering as the temperature dropped. Despite refusing an offer for a ride earlier, she continued waiting. The bus never arrived, and by 7:30 a.m., she was desperately trying to stay warm by pacing and jumping in place. In her desperate state, when the same van reappeared, she hesitantly accepted the ride, a decision her parents struggled to understand, knowing her to be cautious and responsible, but speculated was driven by her need to escape the cold. This new clue reinvigorated the investigation. The van's driver, potentially the last person to see Mia alive, became a critical figure to track down. After a detailed review of the surveillance footage, law enforcement was able to discern the vehicle's license plate, leading them directly to a suspect, Thomas Thompson. Thomas was originally from Southeast Asia, but had settled in a small Danish community of just over 500 residents. Growing up, his family first rented an apartment before moving in with relatives. As an adult, Thomas pursued a military career, rising to the rank of sergeant, where he was not only responsible for his unit, but also engaged deeply with martial arts, earning certifications in various disciplines and first aid. After his military service, he trained as an electrician and was known among his colleagues as a reliable and skilled professional. Thomas appeared outwardly calm and approachable, yet he was known for his rapid mood swings, jovial one moment and melancholy the next, a trait some attributed to his military background. Notably, he abstained from alcohol and any illegal substances. Living alone in a house near the club, he owned a black 2015 Volkswagen, which ultimately led to his arrest. The car was linked directly to him, and he lacked a verifiable alibi on the night of Mia's disappearance, deepening the suspicions against him. The investigation intensified with the examination of the confiscated van. Specialists divided their focus between analyzing physical samples and studying the vehicle's GPS data. A crucial discovery was made. Thomas had attempted to disable the tracking system about 4 hours before encountering Mia. Although he briefly succeeded, the system malfunctioned and reactivated, allowing detectives to reconstruct the van's route that night. It showed the vehicle leaving his home, making several stops, and eventually picking up Mia before heading out of Aalborg. Thomas's path led through various towns before turning into a secluded wooded area. Stayed briefly. The route raised immediate suspicions, prompting a thorough search of the coordinate. Trained search dogs were brought in and quickly discovered a hair tie, torn pieces of clothing, and other personal items scattered in a line, indicative of a chase. This evidence suggested a violent struggle, with signs that Mia may have tried to flee multiple times. The dogs continued to track the scent, leading investigators deeper into the forest to patches of recently disturbed earth. Underneath a shallow layer of soil, they uncovered a horrifying scene. 231 fragments of a human body, confirming the brutal end to Mia's disappearance. The remains were quickly identified as Mia Stevens, though figuring out how she died was difficult because her body was so badly damaged. Most experts thought she might have been choked, and there were signs that her body was mistreated even after her death. Over time, more details emerged. Mia's body was cut up and put back together like a puzzle, but some pieces were missing. Hans Petter Hagen, an experienced pathologist, explained the grim situation. He said that this case was tough for the forensic team, who aren't used to seeing such extreme cases. An electric saw was used to cut the body, and the suspect tried to get rid of the parts using drain cleaner and caustic soda. When that didn't work, he buried This brutal act was shocking, even to someone who had done over 12,000 autopsies. During the first questioning, Thomas stayed calm. He acted confused about why he was arrested and didn't put up much of a fight. When asked about disabling the tracking system in his van, he gave a strange excuse. He said he did it because he had upset a police officer who then started to follow him around, but it turned out this was just another lie from Thomas. The record showed he tried to turn off the tracking device at 2:14 a.m., but due to a technical issue, it kept recording every 15 seconds and turned back on at 9 a.m. By that time, Mia was probably already dead, and Thomas had taken her to his house to cut up her body. On February 10th, the police held a press conference to update the public. During a press conference, detectives discussed the progress of their investigation. They confirmed that Mia Steven was no longer alive and that they had arrested. The authorities committed to finding the truth and promised to keep the community updated, especially as shocking details about the suspect came to light. It appeared that a dangerous individual had been active in the city. Thompson, the suspect, had a history of more severe offenses than previously known. His troubling behavior had been documented before. In 2019, he was caught spying on a female student. There were similar reports from 2015 to 2016 where he was seen peeking into young women's windows and behaving inappropriately. One of these women told her parents, who then contacted the police. Suspect profile was created that closely matched Thomas's description, but he wasn't caught at the time. The investigators believed these were not isolated incidents. 12 years earlier, another disturbing incident occurred. A woman reported an attempted assault after she woke up at night to find someone touching her. When she saw a stranger beside her, the man became more aggressive. He tried to undress her, but she resisted loudly. Luckily, she wasn't alone. Her roommates heard her and came to help. The attacker fled through an open window, the same way he likely entered. Despite a quick response, the police were unable to catch him. Due to missing evidence and time limits on the case, it was hard to legally charge the suspect, yet there were strong signs he was involved. The women affected by his actions could act as witnesses, adding to his profile. When talking to Thompson's ex-girlfriends, more alarming details about his past came out. He would change quickly from being nice to controlling and harmful in relationships. One woman said that after they broke up, she found the brakes in her car had been tampered with. She thought her ex-boyfriend, who she had a tough breakup with, did it. Luckily, she was okay, but proving he did it was tough. Another ex-girlfriend shared scarier details. Thomas showed cruel behavior in private moments. He would tie her up and mistreat her. A third woman found strange files on his computer, a list of women's menstrual cycles. It was unclear how he got this info, but it was very disturbing. Thomas was good-looking and popular, which made it easy for him to start relationships. During a search at his house, experts found bloodstains. Tests showed these were from the victim, proving she had been at his place after the crime. Also, DNA tests on materials from his car perfectly matched Mia's, leaving no doubt he was involved. Everyone was eager to hear Thomas's side of the story, especially after strong evidence against him was found. During several interrogations, however, he kept changing his story, which made it obvious that he was lying and trying to shift the blame. Eventually, some details emerged. Thomas admitted that he did give Mia a ride, but claimed he wasn't waiting for her intentionally. He said he offered to help because she was cold and wanted to do a good deed by driving her home. According to him, Mia suggested they drive around the city for a bit since she wasn't in a hurry, and he agreed. They drove for a while and then went towards the woods where they became intimate. But then he claimed something went wrong. In one version of his story, he said Mia had a seizure, fell, and broke her neck. In another version, he said she suffocated accidentally when her bag strap pressed on her neck. Thomas also claimed that Mia got out of the car and ran, but tripped and fell, suffering a severe injury. Regardless, he admitted that she was nearly dead, and despite his training in first aid, he did nothing to help her. Instead of calling for emergency services, which he feared would not believe his version of the events, he decided to cover up her death. He tried to dissolve her body in chemicals for a day, but when that didn't work to his satisfaction, he dismembered her and buried the parts in the woods, scattering smaller pieces around. He also attempted to burn his stained clothes and showed investigators where he set the fire. Detectives discovered more fragments and tools used in the crime at the site Thomas indicated. He tried to explain the disposal of Mia's body as a panicked response to an accidental death, but neither Mia's family nor the investigators believed his story. Her family was especially upset, convinced that Mia would never have consented to be intimate with someone she barely knew. They, along with the investigators, saw Thomas's explanations as outright lies, viewing him as a cold-blooded criminal posing as an unfortunate bystander. Detectives theorized that on the night of February 6th, Thomas had deliberately gone out looking for a vulnerable target. They believed he chose Mia because she was isolated and vulnerable from the cold, making it easier for him to gain her trust with an offer of a warm ride. Once she was in his van, however, he threatened her, likely with a weapon, and despite her attempts to escape, he overpowered and ultimately killed her. Forensic experts concluded that asphyxiation was the most likely cause of Mia's death, but the incomplete state of her remains suggested there might be more to the story. The violent nature of the attack seemed clear, and there was indirect evidence of her resistance. However, proving the specifics of the assault was challenging due to the condition of the recovered body parts. Ultimately, Thomas was charged and faced trial. During the proceedings, some of his former colleagues testified against him, indicating they had observed his sadistic tendencies long before, including disturbing behaviors and comments during his military service that suggested a deep-seated cruelty. During the trial, Thomas's reactions revealed a disturbing enjoyment of the scenes of extreme cruelty, where people were killed and women were mistreated. Psychiatrists evaluated his mental state and concluded that he was sane, but exhibited narcissistic and antisocial personality traits, meaning he was a sociopath with no capacity for empathy or compassion. In court, Thomas denied being guilty of killing Mia or exploiting her, but he did admit to dismembering her body. In June 2023, the 38-year-old was found guilty of killing Mia Stabin and of indecently handling her body under aggravating circumstances. The court sentenced him to indefinite detention with the possibility of parole after 10 years due to the danger he posed to society. However, in reality, such criminals are often released after serving just 10 years. Notably, Thomas was acquitted of the exploitation charges because there wasn't enough evidence. This raises a troubling question. Do you believe the punishment was fair? And can women in Denmark truly feel safe after this? Thank you for watching this video and taking the time to learn about Mia's story. What are your thoughts on the verdict? Do you think justice was served? Please share your opinions in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and share it with others to keep the conversation going. Stay safe and see you in the next one.